Shalom. This video simply asks the question, why do we need God? After all, there's a bestseller book in the New York Times that says that religion is the cause of most evil in the world and God doesn't exist, so why should we have God? And then there was the death a couple weeks ago of Rabbi Sherwin Wein, who founded secular Jewish humanism. Instead of saying, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one," they pray, they revere that as the best in mankind. So why do we need God? Well, there's a lot of reasons. One is that most people believe in God. Human beings seem to be hardwired for God. Albert Einstein believed in God. But I'll give you a couple of reasons just from the stories this past week. One, there was a big psychological study released that tried to explain the reason why human beings seemingly can be petty one minute and noble the next minute. And the answer was that the subconscious plays a lot more active role during the day than we previously thought. It kind of takes control of us. It can be triggered by all kinds of minor things that we're not even aware of. And even when we think we're being noble, sometimes we're being petty. And there's really no antidote to that. It's not the devil. Jews don't believe in the devil. It's our own inner resources, our own inner subconscious that takes over. And you have to fight against that all the time with noble ideas. And the only antidote to that is the study of Torah. Now, I'll give you a few other examples from the animal kingdom. Rats. Well, we used to, and sometimes we still say, oh, that's a dirty rat, meaning the person's mean. But you know, they did a study that was released a few weeks ago that found that rats are actually nice to each other, unlike human beings all the time. As you can't say he's a dirty rat anymore. Human beings, you got to understand and ask, why aren't human beings nice all the time to one another? Or take chimpanzees. They did a comparison between the animal that's most closely related to human beings, about 98% of the same basic biological structure, and they found that, like human beings, chimps can be vengeful for good purposes of protecting the kingdom and of the pack of the chimps and of punishing bad behavior. But unlike human beings, chimps are not vindictive. They can be vengeful, but they're not in any way unnecessarily vindictive. They're not unnecessarily mean to people for no good reason, unlike human beings. Now take dogs. When dogs fight in the natural world, they do so for some important dog reason. But they don't arbitrarily starve dogs to death and train dogs just to kill one another just for sport, like human beings do. You don't find mass murders unless animals are really hungry, then they kill one or two, unlike human beings who mass murder people. And so all of these reasons show that even in the animal kingdom, they're much more human, quote unquote, than human beings can be. And so how can you say we should revere that which is best in humankind when our subconscious controls us often and makes us petty, when we have all of these examples of how we're actually worse than the animal kingdom in so many ways? Yes, we can be noble. Yes, we can be altruistic. But the answer is you need a source greater than we, a power greater than we, to say this is the law, no murder, no steal, and constantly educate yourself to that. Because if you say simply a human being says it, well, it's easy to figure out some way to rationalize it. Now, you could come back and say, well, in the name of God, all kinds of bad things take place, which they do. You have the Crusades. You have all kinds of, today you have Muslim fanatics killing people in the name of God. That's true. But on balance, think about the huge mass murders in the 20th century. I mean, 50 million by Hitler, including 6 million Jews, and 50 million by Stalin in the communist purges, and 50 million by Mao Zedong. Those three movements of communism in China, and communism in Russia, and in Nazism, all were based on no God, but deifying the person. And when you make a human being God, that is when you get into the greatest trouble. And so it is God alone, the power greater than any force in the universe, who laid down the law to Moses, which is still the eternal law. And that is the reason, one of the reasons why we need God. Now, there's a wonderful and important psychologist who was not exactly antithesis of Freud, but had a very different understanding of human nature than Freud, named Albert Ellis, who passed away a couple weeks ago. And one of the things he said is that human beings have a great capacity for sabotaging their own happiness. Therefore, we need an objective system to balance ourselves off of, to constantly educate ourselves through Torah study as to what God wants from us in order to deal with our very powerful subconscious. to deal with our urges, which are not as nice as rats and much more vindictive than chimps, and are willing to have sport where animals maul and kill each other so we can be entertained. That's why we need God. To realize that yes, we have a touch of God in us. Yes, we are a little lower than the angels, but we need God constantly to reinforce those values by Torah study and by prayer, and by us doing deeds of loving kindness, being commanded to do that. That's why we need God.